Hi, my name's Ed, and Hang on, let's make this candid. I know it's not honourable, it's not trendy, and it's definitely not woke. But I really like Top Gear. Not as it is now, not the bullshit overblown mess that is the Grand Tour, but the banal consumer advice come variety show that managed to shoehorn cheap thrills and toilet humour into a programme about cars, while still being about cars. From the Toyota Hilux to £100 cars to Some Say.
Some say that he sucks the moisture from ducks.
Well, some say the show's writers and presenters could weave whimsy from a wheel axle, if they had to. But as Top Gear grew, so did its budget. And so, unfortunately, did its ego. What was once barely down to earth became over the top, and any semblance of useful car facts, the facade that kept the show on its toes, fell away, leaving behind a bare chassis of poorly judged banter. Why might that be? Let's look into it, with the help of some theorists on colonialism, and also Stuart Lee, for reasons that might become clear. So welcome to this video essay on... No, hang on, wait. Yeah, roll the clip.
Tonight, Richard wears a towel. James and I eat some crisps.
And Top Gear is a victim of its own success.
Oh, of course you must have vegetables!
Just a quick caveat before we get started. I'm not going to examine Top Gear post 2015 in this video. That's a whole other kettle of worms, and while it seems to be moving closer now to a modernised, more appropriate version of what made Top Gear special to begin with, this video isn't about the programme so much as it is about the team of presenters and producers responsible for new Top Gear, and the work those people did at the BBC. With that out of the way, let's get on with the show. About the show. Top Gear has been running on the BBC since 1977. When it began, the programme was very much on the straight and narrow. The concept was effectively a national news style presentation with a motoring motif. This was reflected by the fact that many of the presenters were simply drafts from the national news desk, and Noel Edmonds for some reason.
Why?
The programme continued down this path for almost 25 years, before being cancelled in 2001. Most of the old presenters jumped ship. You can't jump a car, can you? No. Moving to motoring programmes that persisted on other stations, like Channel 5's Fifth Gear or Channel 4's Driven. But Top Gear itself was far from dead. One of its original presenters, a man with big hair and an even bigger ego, had gotten together with a lesser known producer, a man with small hair and an even bigger ego, to, as they put it, get the band back together. Jeremy Clarkson and Andy Woolman had actually been to boarding school together, and it was that boyish spirit of Stockholm Syndrome silliness that they wanted to recreate in their reincarnation of Top Gear. Several bad pilots later, it only took one series for the trio of Clarkson, Hammond and May to come together, with Woolman producing in the background. The new Top Gear quickly took like a duck to water, or why are all of these analogies water-based? Well, the new Top Gear quickly took like a duck with wheels to the road. This was way back in 2003, and things were pretty dull. Dizzy Rascal had just won the Mercury Prize, the Iraq War was barely a glint in Tony Blair's eye, and Twitter was about 3 years away. So, against a backdrop of political correctness, being a bit silly with some motor vehicles was the order of the day. It was with this in mind that new Top Gear took a turn towards broader appeal. They figured quite rightly that more people would be interested in a car show that didn't just focus on reviews, auctions and the occasional granny. By expanding the scope of Top Gear to more moments of daftness, it made the programme more accessible. Even if you weren't looking to buy a new Golf.
Nice.
Heck, even if you were too young to even be in the market. At the same time, new Top Gear remembered that it needed to have its feet on the ground, to offer viewers a dove of useful information baked into a pie of silliness. After all, that was its original spec. the BBC's categorisation of the programme never changed, and that, my friends, is why Top Gear inexplicably holds 3 awards for Most Popular Factual Programme.
There hasn't been a fact on Top Gear for 7 years now. It's just 3 middle-aged men falling over every week.
Even the admittedly subjective Cool Wall could help you gauge whether it was worth throwing money at a convertible Nissan Micra, say, which of course it never is. And Top Gear's early challenges, such as the £100 car challenge, served to make a genuine point about what was possible in the context of modern motoring. Yes, you could buy a car for £100 to drive from London to Manchester, and it can be cheaper than renting. And even though you definitely shouldn't, what does that say about the price of rental cars? The race across London is another great example of a feature that both contained the trademark charm of Top Gear and some genuine, if minimal, motoring advice on the best way to get around the capital. And I should know, because I live here, and I get around. So there was definitely a semblance of consumer advice going on, and that sums up the unique blend of banality and action that made New Top Gear truly special. The fact that you could watch a trio of middle-aged men cross the English Channel in an amphibious pickup truck and believe that they really did it. It's a well-known comedy tactic to apply the unbelievable and the uncanny to things that are usually powerfully dull. Just think of the ridiculous situations that come to pass in the banal surrounds of Spaced's 90s flatshare or Peep Show's office romance. Top Gear was doing the same thing for motoring. But as the years wore on, Top Gear further emphasised the flashy, silly parts of the show at the expense of the factual elements. In my view, destroying the tender balance between the comedy and the banality made it so great. And that bombast from the final wheeze of Top Gear was inherited by the Grand Tour. In the very first series, the 3 now thoroughly middle-aged presenters pretend to do a Call of Duty, kill celebrities on camera for gags,
Simon Pegg!
and literally blow up Jeremy Clarkson's home. But there's one thing, above all, that they stuck to like a tight corner, and that's political incorrectness. Now, you're likely well aware of Jeremy Clarkson's act of violence that lost him his job at the BBC. But that's just the most famous incident in a slew of controversies where one of the presenters flew off the wheel. There's the time Clarkson said an unacceptable word in a clip that didn't go to air. There's the time Clarkson made a joke out of an unacceptable term for Asian people.
There's a slope on it.
And there's the time, actually, I think there were several, that Clarkson insulted an entire country.
Everybody's very fat, everybody's very stupid, and everybody's very rude.
We were all reunited in La Paz, the world's highest and worst capital city.
That's full of spiders. Signposts here are all full of gibberish. They're all communists. Can't go there because the Americans will shoot you.
Of course, it'd be disingenuous to say it's all Clarkson. Here's a clip of James May admitting to smoking sweet green on a bus.
It's easier sitting here.
Yeah, it's easier, actually, because you're not being filmed. So you can have a joint. No, sorry.
And here's a clip of Richard Hammond, older but no wiser, calling ice cream yay.
It's all right, I don't eat ice cream. I think it's something to do with being straight.
But more often than not, it's Hammond and May who tacitly accept, or worse, enable, Clarkson's bigotry. Now, you know you're not doing well when you're being roasted by Stuart Lee, but that's exactly what happened.
But Richard the Hamster Hammond doesn't do that, does he? He just stands next to Jeremy Clarkson, giggling. Blah, 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 gypsies. Ha 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 ha, gypsies. Ha 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 ha. Imagine being a gypsy. Ha 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 ha. In a caravan. Ha 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 ha. Ha ha, not even in a car. Ha ha.
And while this is all well and good, or should that be well and bad, the political incorrectness is only the most obvious problem with Top Gear. The jewel in the crown of Thornby issues. God, that was forced. You can -1 for that one. So here's what I really want to talk about. On almost a yearly basis since 2005, the Top Gear presenters have made trips abroad to produce what have become uniformly known as the specials. Feature-length episodes composing trips across one or more country with a very general objective. cross Botswana, find the source of the Nile. You know, the usual blokey stuff you do down the pub. These specials are stacked with wild generalisations, mischaracterisations, and the unique brand of ignorance that probably hit its peak among middle-aged men in the noughties.
We'll now attempt to achieve in 8 days what the Americans failed to achieve in 10 years. Get from the south of Vietnam to the north.
Yes, Top Gear's specials portray the country the presenters visit as one ripe for an adventure, where Clarkson, Hammond and May engage in a Livingston-esque experience of the country they're travelling through, taking advantage of local traders,
A cashmere suit for £70.
and taking the mickey out of the local culture.
Since you can buy Rolexes here for a fiver and lunch for 50p, you're standing in the world's biggest pound shop.
And then there's India, widely considered the worst Top Gear special, and also the worst offender in this respect. The India special was considered the worst by its own creators, precisely because the general objective was too general: mount a trade mission to India. This is an explicit return to a colonial past. The underlying assumption is that the hegemony of the British Raj is something to which we can pay homage, let alone recreate. The special implies that there's something good to come of a troop of Brits selling their wares to the impoverished souls of a former colony, sailing through all India's dire straits in the process. Of course, the trade mission goes comically wrong.
This was wrong.
But that's not the point. This all serves to perpetuate the cultural paradigm in which the West, the developed world, defines the East, or the global South as we call it, and looks down on them based on their definition. The imaginative examination of things Oriental was based more or less exclusively upon a sovereign Western consciousness, out of whose unchallenged centrality an Oriental world emerged. That's a quote from Edward Said, one of the first scholars of post-colonial studies, on his theory of Orientalism. Top Gear is Orientalist programming. It paints the world through the eyes of three Brits who take a surface-level interest in cultures beyond their own,
You want more?
but never really let the other cultures speak.
In 1994, this country witnessed the worst genocide in the history of humankind. Now look, it's incredible how quickly things, on the surface at least, mend themselves.
But if Top Gear is so focused on the history of the British Empire, African explorers, Indian traders, random acts of murder, is Top Gear imperialist?
Also, we're Livingston, Burton and Speke.
Well, if by imperialist we understand extending a country's influence abroad, which could be through economic or military means, then Top Gear is only imperialist in very narrow, reaching terms. The broadcasting of Top Gear overseas, along with selling the rights for other countries to produce their own versions of Top Gear, helps build a kind of soft power overseas, because of the nature of Top Gear as quite a British programme.
No! What? The chimney's fallen off!
You're joking!
Keep going.
The build-up of this economic soft power means that other British products, especially television programmes, might experience heightened demand. I'm not sure this is why the BBC have let Top Gear get away with all the things they've gotten away with over the years. Regardless, this ongoing configuration of soft power, in the absence of economic or political power, can be engineered to maintain a power dynamic beyond a strictly imperialist sphere of influence. And when it's supported by a narrative of Orientalism, this creates a political atmosphere where decisions such as trade,
Bloody hell!
aid, and warfare are shaped by political misconceptions about the global south. The foreign aid budget is a great example of this. Developed countries funnel billions of pounds a year into the economies of the global south, on the basis that surely these impoverished, hoe-wielding lads couldn't help themselves. But half the reason why they're impoverished and hoe-wielding is because of the sovereign debt and compulsory trade agreements we forced on them after we granted them independence. In this context of soft power Orientalism, it's not surprising that most of the countries where Top Gear has been sold, and all of the countries that have produced a homemade version of Top Gear, are either developed countries, i.e. former colonisers, or countries that are now pursuing a colonialist agenda, such as China. Having their own version of Top Gear lets them bring back that old colonial agenda, and Top Gear China have indeed been to Xinjiang. Just to sum up, The uniting factor of all these poorly judged specials isn't necessarily the Orientalist undertones. It's how the sheer number of snafus seems to be a direct consequence of Top Gear growing to worldwide fame.
Nobody in the history of Africa has ever been more comfortable than this.
What might be a relatively harmless joke about the North or caravan holidays, a bigoted man being bigoted about his own country, obviously doesn't carry when extended to former colonies. But why exactly did things escalate that far? When Top Gear was first relaunched by Clarkson and Willman in 2003, the BBC asked the team to net a meagre 3 million viewers within the first year on air, through a blend of bad jokes, retention from the old series, and, I don't know, druids? They managed it. But the goals for viewing figures just kept expanding from there. Unfortunately, the figures themselves rose in kind. But as Top Gear grew, it garnered a greater percentage of viewers, and a greater budget to match. That meant the show could get more lavish, and in a drive to get more viewers, it could really up the spectacle. As a commercially successful show then, it's likely that Top Gear didn't want to break the format which made it so financially lucrative. There's also the suggestion that the presenters had to act up their characters to give the audience what they wanted to see, given that the show had manufactured the audience's expectations by focusing in on these characters, leading to a vicious cycle of acting up and cliché.
Clarkson! Clarkson!
Clarkson! I know it's you, you insufferable oaf. I'm on the bloody throne.
So through its pursuit of unbridled growth, the BBC helped create the Orientalist monster that Top Gear eventually became. While keeping up the cottage industry of Jeremy Clarkson driving cars from the back seat might have been playing it safe, the choice to keep feeding Top Gear millions of pounds helped create an environment for unbridled bigotry,
That's quintessentially German. Trafficators that go like that.
unchecked egos,
A sat-nav that only goes to Poland.
and a man being slapped in the face for not getting a steak. And that's what brought the whole sorry affair to a close. In 2005, it was suggested, by James May of all people, that Top Gear should get a dog. Richard Hammond was in the market for a new one, and so it was. Top Gear Dog came on screen just in time for Series 8, and was promptly ditched after just one series. You see, Top Gear Dog was a perfectly lovely dog in normal dog circumstances, but forced out of her comfort zone onto the big screen, she started to cause problems. Cowardly in front of the cameras, vomiting onto guests, forced into Richard's arms.
Top Gear Dog's been sick.
And there's a comparison here to be made with Top Gear in its entirety. Incubated in Little England, the BBC would feed it just enough to get it to do slightly ridiculous things in overwhelmingly dry circumstances. The original small scale of Top Gear kept the egos of the presenters in check and kept the premises grounded in the relatable consumer advice facade that Top Gear used to create comedy. Thrust into worldwide success, it spiraled out of scope and began to lose the spirit of its premise. It went from being a consumer advice show that was subversive in just how silly it was, to a show that was just silly. Much like Top Gear Dog, the show itself vomited into the careers of Clarkson, Hammond and May, making it such that anything else they did was now tinged by Top Geariness. May probably did the best job of escaping this, as his pedantry and geekiness were at least somewhat earnest, but you can still tell that all three are now doomed to play characters on screen. Those characters, with all their less than forgivable faults, symbolise what we will remember of Top Gear in the eyes of late capitalism, colonialism, Orientalism, broadcast worldwide. They're all the show ever was, and now they're all it can be.
You look like a gay cowboy, and you look like a gay terrorist.
No, you look like a terrorist with a broken windscreen wiper, and your face is ridiculous.